Join me on my journey as I explore wealth in all areas of life. I'm your host, Mindie, and this is The Lucrative Society. On today's episode of The Lucrative Society, I have a very special guest. This person is a #1 New York Times bestseller. And I will say this, when I first met him, my husband, Sean, had said, "You won't believe who I just hung out with." We were all supposed to be at a conference and we had not been at the conference. We were hanging out elsewhere outside. And he's like, "I just spent hours talking to this guy. You're going to love him." Now, I'm skeptical, of course, because I'm an introvert. I don't love small talk. I like to connect on real deep things. And I was like, "Okay, Sean, who is this?" He said, "It's Tucker Max. Do you know him?" And I said, "Tucker Max is an asshole."
I have a book called Assholes Finish First. It's a reasonable expectation.
Right. My point being, I did love meeting this person. And Tucker, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I remember that. It was you, me, Sean, and Cameron Harold.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Harvey McKay. I remember exactly what I said. And that's when you looked at me and started laughing. You're like, "All right, I like this guy." I remember it very clearly.
I do as well. And I have to say that it was a great lesson for me on having preconceived notions of people, who are in the media or on social media or just have some kind of presence online, and then meeting you in real life. And I was like, okay, cool. So to get started, one of the first things that I want to talk about, because on this show, I really focus on looking at money and happiness. So this idea of wealth. What is your definition of wealth?
So let me answer that a little bit roundabout. So the only two things I think that matter in life are the relationships you have with the people you love and the things you do that matter to them. And that's pretty much it. So I would define a happy, content, rich lifestyle as a lifestyle where you're spending most of your time with the people you love and doing things that matter to them. I would define wealth a little bit differently. Wealth, because again, it depends how there's so many ways to look at it. Wealth has just it has a very specific meaning to me, right? So rich means you have a lot of material resources, right? Plenty for you. To me, wealth is, in its conventional meaning, is you have enough material resources for you and for your family for a long time to come, generations, right? Now, I don't argue with people who are saying, true wealth is love or whatever. I get that, but I think I feel like that's not a bastardization. It's a stretch of the word, which I'm cool with, and I totally get, and I say it all the time. But in the real sense of the definition of wealth, that's the way I see it, right? Like rich is you got some money and you're doing okay. Wealth is you don't think about money because you have so much.
I like that definition a lot. And I have to tell you, for those of you listening that are not seeing what I'm seeing right now, Tucker has this extensive library behind him. So to me, that's wealth to me, is just having resources like that. So awesome. So tell me a little bit about your wealth evolution. Did you grow up with money? Did you not grow up with money? And kind of take us through your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, I had a really weird childhood. So on my mom's side, my family is old. We're about as aristocratic as Americans get. So my grandfather is John C. Floyd, the third, and his 3rd or 4th or 5th generation great grandfather was William C. Floyd, who signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
Wow.
And so my aunts are in the Daughters of Liberty and shit. They're friends with William Taft's kids and bullshit like that, all that nonsense. So that's my mom's side of the family. But by the time I came around, seriously, Cassius Clay was like that. That's the line. So Henry Clay, the famous senator, his cousin was Cassius Clay, who was like a very famous abolitionist. And so like Muhammad Ali was named Cassius Clay. It's so funny. Muhammad Ali changed when he joined the Nation of Islam. He changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali, and he said he did that because he didn't want to have his slave name anymore. But the true story is, I don't know if you knew this or not, but the true story, the reason his father and his grandfather had the name Cassius Clay is because my whatever great-great-great-grandfather released his slaves long before, freed his slaves long before the Civil War. And they all took the name Cassius Clay as a way to respect their the man who granted them their freedom, right?
Wow.
I know, exactly, which is a better story. But I get why Ali changed his name in the times in the 60s. I get it. It makes sense. But by the time it got to me, Cassius Clay, between the Clay family owned most of Kentucky. There's like Clay County, it's like that was and the Floyd family. Those are two of the major families in Kentucky. And the Floyd family was as old as it gets. By the time it got to me, there was no money left. Like my grandparents were okay. Like they were still kind of who's who. They lived like in the social register who's who. My aunts and uncles and mom, that generation were all shitbirds, all of them. And it's like it's just a pretty classic story of like each generation gets less and less, right? And then now what's funny is my generation, me and my cousins, we're all doing great. Like I'm the big one, but there's a bunch of us that are doing really cool stuff because we had no money, we had no access to any of that stuff, but we had all the we grew up in the lore of it, but we were all not poor, but definitely middle class. But then weirdly on my dad's side, so my dad was told, so we always knew it was his great grandparents were immigrants, right? So like they were Hungarian, off the Ellis Island, etc. We were told they were Catholic. My grandfather and father were raised Catholic. Turns out they were Ashkenazi Jew. And they were running from, they were running from one of the minor persecutions before the big one, in the teens or something. Came to America, changed their names, went to LA, just decided they were Catholics, and never told anyone, not my grandfather or my father. The reason we know this is because I took 23andMe, and I was 25% Ashkenazi Jew. And I was like, Dad, do you know you're 50% Jew? He's like, what are you talking about? He did the test. It's like, oh my God. So it turns out we were Jews.
That's amazing.
Exactly. And so now my dad's parents they both worked at, my granddad flew for the Flying Tigers, like in the Pacific in the war, and then helped start like the company that became Flying Tigers that FedEx eventually bought. It was International Freight. He flew for them and stuff. And then my grandmother ran the commissary at Warner Brothers for like 40 years. And so they were pretty well off, but middle class, LA, back when there was a middle class in LA before it was now Hollywood. And then my dad grew up and all that, and he became an entrepreneur and made a lot of money. He started a bunch of restaurants in South Florida, did very, very well. Hasn't really kept a lot of it, but different question. And so like I was that weird kid who like grew up kind of poor, like lower middle class, but my mom's side like were snooty and like sons and daughters of liberty and thought they were important but had no money. My dad's side were like literally lying about their heritage but had a bunch of money and had like kind of worked through all that. So I saw, but my dad was like actually running in really high-end circles. You're a high-end restaurateur, like his friends, all had jets and stuff, right? And so like I saw a lot of money on my dad's side. My parents were divorced when I was little. So like I would visit my dad and he was around a lot of money and a lot of rich people, but I wasn't really part of that world, but I saw it. And then I lived with my mom and we didn't have a whole lot of money. And like, I didn't have like all my nice stuff my dad bought for me. Like the reason I had nice stuff at all, any clothes at all that were nice is my dad bought them. But like they had like all of the non-monetary benefits of privilege, right? I mean, there's a million going to cotillion and all the nonsense stuff that rich people do. And so like, I had a very unusual childhood in that like, I'd be literally deer hunting for food one weekend. And then like, on a private jet the next weekend. But as a kid, it's super weird. That's like not that, like Joe Rogan does that now. Like that's normal. But like when you're a kid in the 80s, that's a super unusual thing.
Yeah. Did you find yourself gravitating toward one when you were a child,
Oh,
gravitating toward one or the other, or just that's
I
how
couldn't
life was?
stand I couldn't stand either world,
Got
honestly.
it.
My dad's world was completely fake. I mean, that was like the go-go 80s and 90s, you know, like the media. I mean, he lived in Miami, right? So like it was basically Scarface without the drugs or the Colombians or the Cubans, right? It was like, because he lived in Boca, which is funny because he didn't think he was a Jew and he lived with all the Jews, right? So it's like, come on, Dad. It's like, I wonder why I always felt good around these are my
Right.
people. It's like, yeah, no shit. So, yeah, like, you know, every Jew I know has like a grandparent in Boca, right? Like it's a joke. And they all know every Jew I've ever met knows my restaurants, be it my family's restaurants, because they all have family in Boca. It's
Wow.
crazy. So no, I couldn't stand that world. It was so fake. Not the Jewish people, but like the rich people, rich snobby people that my dad always hung out with, right? Totally fake. And then I couldn't stand my mom's side because I'm like, you know, my mom had like a painting in our house that the czar, like Tsar Nicholas, the last czar of Russia, gave to Cassius Clay, our great great grandfather, whatever. And she was like always so proud of it. I'm like, Mom, you never even met that dude. Like he was dead, but before your parents were even married, he was dead. Like you don't know him. You know, or my grandmother met him when she was a girl, like, and then he died. I'm like, you didn't do any of this. Like, what are you proud of? You know, like they were like, it's like they had all this pride and all this shit that none of them did, you know, or had anything to do with. And then it's like you look at their lives and it's like, you guys are just pathetic and you don't do anything and you don't like, and so I couldn't stand, like, I had the accomplishment on one side, but it was all bullshit. Like it was all arrogance. It was all narcissism. And then the other side was all the pride with none of the accomplishment. And I couldn't stand either line, honestly. I didn't feel like I fit in either place.
Well, you know what? That makes sense. Just knowing you today, in that you don't take yourself too seriously. You're like, let's just focus on this shit that's important and really nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And you've accomplished a lot. You've done a lot of things. You've created a lot of really, really interesting things. So can you bring us kind of up to speed today and just talk a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yeah. So, I wrote a bunch of bestsellers and I did all that stuff and that was cool. And then, I made enough money. I didn't really have to do anything. I wrote books about drinking and hooking up in your 20s. And then I was in like my 30s and I was like, I don't want to write about this anymore. It's just not interesting to me. And so I retired from it. And I kind of didn't do much for about 3-4 years. I mean, for me, I invested in a bunch of companies and I got in some big ones like Slack and a few others. And it did pretty well. Deep Eddy Vodka and a few others that had big exits. Teachable, which just exited for a lot of money. But so that was pretty cool. And I wrote a few things, but I just didn't do much, right? In terms of like a dedicated thing. And then about 6 years ago, this woman at an entrepreneur dinner kind of called me out because she's like, how do I write a book? Like everyone's asking me to write a book. And I tried it and it's just awful. And I have a family and I have a company and I just can't weed through all the nonsense to figure this out. Right. So how do I get a book out of me? And of course, I gave her this total elitist, snobby writer answer, which is like, you have to open a vein on the keyboard. And yeah, basically, I just told you had to be a writer. And she like listened to me politely for a few minutes and then rolled her eyes. Was like, Tucker, are you an entrepreneur? Because this is an entrepreneur dinner. And I'm like, yeah, of course I am. She's like, no, I don't think you are. Because a real entrepreneur would help me solve my problem and not lecture me about hard work. And I was like, fuck. Because she was totally right. She was 100% right. It was like one of those gut punches where like someone's so right that like I can't even make a bad argument to argue with her. I just have to eat it. And then I got obsessed with the idea, like, how do I get a book out of her without her having to learn how to be a writer? And so it took me about 2 months, but I realized, oh, this is a multi-thousand-year-old solved problem. Like scribes have existed for thousands of years. Like Socrates never wrote anything down. Plato wrote all of it down. And Marco Polo didn't write anything down. His cellmate did, and go down the list, right? And so I got on a whiteboard and I wrote down every step and what does it take to write a book. And I realized, it only takes like maybe 40% of this stuff is necessary to have the author there, which is, it's an important 40%, but like there's a ton of work where I don't need her. And so basically I figured out, okay, how do I get, her positioning out of her outline? And I was like, okay, I can just interview her, and it probably only a few hours on the phone. It was a little more than I thought, maybe about 10 to 15 hours. I thought I could do it in three. Three's not possible. So anyone tells you can write a book in a weekend or dictate a book in 90 minutes, they're full of shit. It's going to be terrible. 10 to 15 is the bare minimum. And so I got it. I interviewed her, got stuff. I'm like, oh, this is right here. And I just went through and cleaned it all up. The big thing that she wanted was couldn't be ghostwritten, right? So it's not like, I'm not going to go research her field. She was in like pop-up retail or something. I don't care. I'm not going to learn about this. It's got to come out. It's got to be her ideas and her words and her voice. And so we made it work. This is how bad of an entrepreneur I am. We made it work. It was a great book. She loved it. And she's like, what do I tell people? Because I quoted her just enough money to make it worth my while. Because for me, it was like pride. Like, I have to do this. But she's like, what do I tell people you charge? And I'm like, charge for what? She's like, to do the same service. I'm like, no, why would I do that again? No, I figured it out. I don't want to do this more. And she's like, okay, I'll tell people 15 grand or whatever. And like, she starts sending people to me, and I'm like, ugh. And so I had a buddy of mine, Zach Obrunt, who is now my co-founder, but he was doing some other work for me. I'm like, look, man, these people keep annoying me and writing me checks to write books for them. I don't want to do this. Okay, do you want to do this? He's like, yeah, of course. And so I showed him my process. He's like, oh, he's a smart dude. He was a decent writer. He's like, oh, I could totally do this. And so we just split the money. He started doing the work. And then after like 3 months, we'd done like $250,000 in business. He's like, dude, we kind of have a company here now. We need to run this. And I'm like, yeah, I think you might be right. You might be right. And so that was August of 2014, or the fall of 2014, really. And we've done about 40 million in sales since. And we're now like 51 full-time people and like 170 freelance. And we're coming up on 2,000 books, and some really big ones like David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, and Tiffany Haddish's book, Last Black Unicorn. Nassim Taleb's got a book coming out in 3 weeks. We did that one. David Bach, like all these people, like we've done a bunch of big ones now. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I love hearing the backstory of that too, where you're like, what? This is a thing?
I'm so dumb. It's so funny. The frustrating thing is like, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh God, I could have done this 5 years ago. What am I doing? This is so easy. And like, now it turns out this is hard to scale. Like, it's easy to do for a person, right? Because I know how to write books. But writing, like creating the process of writing books at scale with lots of different people. And then, oh dude, this was so hard. Like I had to step aside as CEO about 1.5 years in, and we had to like get a real CEO. And thank God, that's the reason we're at 40+ million in sales. It's because of him, not me. Like I had a great product and a great idea, and I'm good at a lot of things, but the business of building a business is a totally different skill set from anything else. And you are arrogant and foolish if you think you can learn that quickly and easily. It is painful and difficult.
Yeah, I went through that painful and difficult process myself. So definitely agree with you on that. Talk to me about the balance between your business entrepreneurial brain and the writer artist brain. I myself have this struggle. I went and did my MFA in writing. Like that's always how I perceive myself, as a writer. And yet I have a challenge integrating those.
Yeah. So I have learned, I do have a pretty good business mind. What I've learned to do though, a lot of people talk about, shoring up your weaknesses and balance. And I'll tell you what, that makes sense if you're a pocket knife, right? If you need to have a lot of different tools, right? Or a multi-tool, like my son just bought his first multi-tool. He's so excited about it. It has like 20 things in it. And like, if you're a multi-tool, then you need to have, like, each thing needs to work and needs to be good. But what I realized when we hired JT, he's the CEO, like I thought I was close to being a good enough CEO. And then about 3 months or definitely 6 months after being around an actual great CEO, I was like, not only was I not close, I couldn't even conceive of what it looked like to be great. Like I was so far away that like, I'll never forget the time reminds me is like when I was in high school and I thought I was a really good basketball player. And then I played against a guy in the NBA and I was like, you're not human. Like, this is a whole different, I can't even conceive of how good you are.
Yeah.
Like it's not even, I'm like, I thought I could maybe play in the league. I don't even think I can hold a towel for a dude in the league. And he's like, no, you can't. You're right. And it was kind of the same thing. It was like, okay, maybe I could be that good, but that's years of practice and work at things that I am not good at and don't like. And so what I've really learned how to do recently, and it's why our company has really started to go parabolic, is I've stopped trying to do the things I'm bad at. And I've found people who are really good at those things and who I trust. And I let those people do those things for me. And then I focus, Dan Sullivan calls it unique ability, right? And I'm a big believer in this. Now it took me years, but, and so like what we do right now, what I do in my company, I do like 2 things, 3 things. That's it.
Nice.
But the 3 things I do, I am absolutely the best in the world at least one, and I'm top 0.001% in the other 2. And so like JT's created an engine around me that just like, I'm the engine. He's created a whole car around me for those things. And then we have other things too, where we got people who have great abilities, and then okay, you create the car around that person, let them be the engine, right? And so I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, is they're like, how do I become well-rounded? I'm not saying don't be well-rounded. If you want to, go do it. If that's not your thing, you might be better off doubling down on your strengths and just subcontracting out your weaknesses, which is what I've done.
Such a great reminder about unique ability and just really focusing in on those one or few things. I constantly need to be reminded of that myself because I'm interested in everything. So one of the frameworks that I use in this podcast to get to know you a little bit better is an acronym called HERB. I'll walk you through each of the steps. H stands for habits. What are some of the habits that you employ on a daily or weekly basis that just help you, not in business only, but really just to be the man that you are?
Yeah, I don't look at business and life as separate. They're all the same to me. Like there's no difference. Like I don't believe work is a thing I do, but it's all my life. So yeah, like the only person I know who separates work and life is Batman, and I'm not Batman. Right? So, and he don't even do it that effectively, by the way. I'm not trying to imitate his life. He's all lonely. No, fuck that, man. All right. So what are the habits? Well, I go to bed early. So
what time is early for you?
Like 9 o'clock, 10's the latest.
Okay.
I'm asleep. Now the reason is my wife, because we got 3 little kids and another one's probably on the way soon. And the reason is because she wakes up, our youngest is a year old. She wakes up with the kids if they need to wake up, breastfeed or whatever, right? Because what do I have to add to a breastfeeding situation? Nothing. But then like I get up at 6 or whatever with the kid, and then she gets to sleep in as long as she wants, right? So that way we both get enough sleep. It's not optimal, but it's better than both of us being awake and both of it, like it's terrible. So then like if I'm in bed at 9, 10 at the latest, I'm up at 6, that's 8 hours of sleep. Like I'm as militant as I can be about getting sleep. Sleep is the foundation of all health. Number 1, most important thing. Then close second is nutrition. It's how you eat. So it's really simple. Like I do my very best to avoid all refined sugars, carbohydrates, meaning like starchy carbs like potatoes and bread and rice, and seed oils, right? So like canola, all that nonsense. Yeah. Those 3 things are poison to humans. I'm not like militant about them. I'm like, we don't really have this stuff in the house. If we go out and like, there's amazing bread, I'm going to have some. I'm not a weirdo about it, but I'm pretty good about that stuff. And then the third big thing is exercise. Like I don't do a whole lot now other than MMA and jiu-jitsu, right? Like I fight, which is pretty intense. Like if you're doing that, you don't need to do a whole lot more. I do, I used to do Olympic and free lifting, and I love it. It's great. But you get older, it's pretty rough on joints. So I do this thing called X3 now, which is sort of like bands. Everyone knows what bands are. It just has a system that connects a bar to the bands. So you're doing squats and all this sort of stuff with a bar, but using bands as resistance. You've seen this if you ever watch ESPN. Like a lot of sports teams use this stuff. Same thing. So like it's just easier on the joints is all. So that's pretty. And I do that maybe 3 times a week at most for like 20 minutes. That, and then I go jujitsu 3 times a week for an hour.
And you also are running around after 3 children, so I guarantee
Yeah,
that.
but they're not. I don't get the whole idea that children are work. Yeah, but they're not like, I don't. The idea of running around chasing them is not like. We have a very different parenting style than most. We're like what people would call free range parenting. You know, like we have very clear and distinct boundaries, and we hold those firm. But within those boundaries, I'm not on top of my kids trying to helicopter them or whatever, man. Like, it's so funny. People come over to our house and they'll like see our kids like swinging from something or climbing on. We have this huge kitchen island, and they'll be climbing on it, swinging off their little chair, and they will freak out and they'll run at the kid. And I'll say, stop, back up. She's fine. She knows exactly what she's doing. You're the one who has the problem, not her, right? Notice that she's not laying on the ground. If she lays on the ground crying with blood coming out of her head, feel free to rush towards her and help, right? Until that moment comes, leave her alone, you know? Or if you see her waving a knife around or something, okay, I got you. I'm with you, right? But no, we let them, like, you know, they pick out their own clothes, they whatever. Now, again, at the same time, the thing with that, it's not just free for all, right? Because if it was free for all, it'd be bedlam in the house.
Right.
We would live in a pigsty. So we have very clear systems, you know, like, okay, like in the morning when they wake up, before they get to play, we let them watch iPad or play, you know, video games in the morning. So before they do, they gotta, you know, eat their breakfast. They have to brush their teeth. They have to be ready for school, and the room has to be clean, right? So it's easy. We don't have to get on them about chores because they wanna watch Cocomelon so much that like they get all their shit done. It's real simple. Like you just set up simple systems for kids, and I'm not saying that takes care of all the problems. It doesn't, of course. It just makes you don't have to be hectic and harried with kids. Now, we've got a 1-year-old who's got 3 teeth coming in. Okay, it's going to be hellish. He's going to be screaming. He's upset. He's in pain. But that's like a short window of time. For the most part, it's really not that hectic or harried.
Well, I like that too, because that encourages the kids to be able to trust themselves and then to learn what's going to work or what's going to maybe cause them some pain. So I think that is awesome. So moving from the H to the E, E stands for environment. And clearly I could see that you bring lots of books into your environment, but what else do you allow in or not allow into your environment?
Yeah, this is another thing I've really tuned into recently. I'm big on cleanliness. No, I'm not like a weirdo fastidious, like taking a Q-tip to the corners, but like I like things to be neat and in order. You can tell my library, it's like it's neat and in order, right? I do like to have things kind of. If I have a lot of open loops, it keeps, I find myself distracted and unable to focus, right? Which is pretty common for a creative. So I make sure all those open loops are closed. And then also like, you know, listen, I have money, so I can do this, but I live in a place where like we back up to a huge green belt, right? So we got woods behind us, and we're actually going to buy a ranch soon, but even now, and then we have a full guest house, so we can have guests all the time, and they're not in our fucking hair, right? They're over in their own house, and they can stay for right. They can stay for 3 or 4 days, and it's no problem, and we love having them, and it's great. We have a pool. Right. So that's another reason we don't have to chase our kids around a lot is because they can go swim. Right. They can, we'll be out there with them. But for the most part, they're like little fish. We just let them get at it. Right. So I make sure and create and even when I didn't have this house, the place I lived had all the things around it that I wanted. Right. So we made a very conscious sort of thing. My house has a huge wine cellar. We're like, we don't drink much, but we're huge. Like when we drink, it's wine. We're big wine people. So it's like we just figured out what are the things that we really care about. And then we created a life where those are those things, you know, like those things are around us. Those are the stuff around us. You know?
Awesome. So moving to the R, and I feel like you and I could talk about this one for the next 10 hours. So I'm going to maybe ask you for like 2 or 3 or 4, but R stands for resources. Resources can be books, courses, programs, mentors, whatever else you want to mention. But what are some of the resources that have influenced you a great deal and that you would recommend to others?
Man, you're right. There's so much.
There's so much.
It depends. It depends on the goal. It just 100% depends on the goal. right?
Well, let's say like at least one business-ish, one personal-ish. We can use MDMA as a resource.
Okay, well, if we're talking about like medicines, then that's it.
That's a
That's the
resource.
thing. That's 100% the thing. Yes. Okay. If you want a resource that will help you learn about yourself and heal, if you're actually willing to do the work, there is nothing better than, let's just call them plant medicines. MDMA is by far the best place to start for people because it's so gentle, it's so safe, it's so easy to use. There's virtually no side effects. Like it's an amazing medicine. I pretty much graduated from MDMA. It was amazing. And then I for the most part now I'm on, I basically have just graduated pretty much from psilocybin and LSD. I was alternating with those. LSD assisted psychotherapy and psilocybin assisted psychotherapy, which were both fantastic and did amazing stuff with me. The best combo actually was LSD and MDMA because LSD just opens you up and forces truth into your face. But MDMA is so soft and gentle, it helps you process it. That's the best combo I've found. I would not recommend just jumping right into LSD and MDMA. It's a little bit of the deep end. But for your second or third session, you can go very low dose LSD, like 25 to 50 micrograms, with obviously an experienced guide and therapist, with 150 milligrams of MDMA, and that's a great combo, and it works. That moved mountains for me. And then,
have you done ayahuasca?
No, I have not. I'm about to kind of graduate or to move into the higher medicines. I'm actually starting with 5-MeO DMT, only because I've had a lot of people. I'm pretty lucky. I've got 3 like guides who really know their stuff, and 2 of the 3 are both like where you are in your progression. You've basically quote graduated from ayahuasca. Like it's a great medicine, but it was never that appealing to me. I mean, I would have been willing to do it. It just wasn't and most of the work that I've done in mushrooms and LSD, it's the same stuff,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. The reason I was asking about Aya is because the combo that I have done in the past was mushrooms and ayahuasca, which was a really interesting experience. But I would say for me, LSD is the one that's like just clearest and cleanest.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely clearest and cleanest, but it's they're all different and they all have great purposes. It's like a carpenter's not like, oh, a hammer, that's the thing. You got to use a hammer. It's like that doesn't make sense, right? Hammers and saws and lathes and chisels, every tool has a purpose. And all the medicines that I've used have all been very good for the purpose, right? So I'm going to do 5-MeO next couple months. We'll see what that is. And then I'll probably do ayahuasca at some point just to do it, to try it. For the last 2 years, this has been a main focus of mine, is doing plant medicine therapies. And the last one especially, it was pretty clear that I'd gotten through pretty much all the trauma. It's sort of like plant medicine works for 2 different things, I think. And roughly speaking, helping you deal with your trauma and your emotional issues, and then helping you with, let's say, enlightenment, mind expansion, right? And the 2 things overlap a little bit, but not a whole lot. And I was lucky. I had good guides who were like, look, dude, you have a lot of trauma and a lot of shit you need to work through. If you start start with ayahuasca or start with the higher medicines, those are really difficult ways to work through trauma. Like you can do it, but it is going to be painful and hard. And whereas if you start in the more entry level medicines, MDMA, lower dose psilocybin, lower dose LSD, you can work through the really dark, hard stuff that's sort of like yours. Then you can go into the mind expansion and enlightenment with the higher medicines without carrying all that baggage with you. And thank God I listened to them, because man, like it was hard. It was really hard. The work I've been doing, God, it's been hard. I can't imagine. Like, it's funny. Like some of them, Dan Engel helps me a lot, and he was telling me stories about like he started with ayahuasca, and he does the stories he tells me about like his first 10, 20 sessions or whatever. I'm just like, that sounds like the worst shit ever. He's like, it was rough.
It can be very intense.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. And thank you for being so open about that. I know you and I have had conversation on that before, and I'm all about it. Tell me this. What are some of your beliefs? That's the B in herb. What are beliefs or worldviews?
About what?
the way that you see the world, core beliefs that you
Oh
hold.
man, well that has shifted radically over the
Yeah,
last
I know,
2
which is why
years.
I'm so interested to ask you about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I'll tell you, this was my first MDMA LSD session. This is where I saw this really clearly. This is going to sound like some woo-woo bullshit. I'm just going to
Good,
tell
let's
you.
go.
All right. Okay. I knew that we humans create our own reality. I understood that conceptually, right? Because I'm in media and marketing and storytelling, so I get how, you create worlds with story, with worlds with words, right? And you create worlds with stories. And I really understood how literally I can tell a story in my head, put it somewhere else out to the world, and bring resources and people to me. And I like all that. I get it. I got that. What I did not understand. So I understood like there's a metaphorical layer at which we create our own reality that I understood, right? I think that we actually create our own reality almost totally and fractally in all dimensions. And I don't mean literally like I created this table with my mind,
Right.
but like it was so funny the way the medicine showed this to me, man. Because like I knew physics, I know physics pretty well. I went to the University of Chicago, and I was like, thinking about being an evolutionary biologist for a while. So and I won the physics award and chem award in my high school. So like I understand physics decently well, like not enough to be like go work at the Hadron Collider, but enough.
Right.
And so the medicine's like, dude, you understand what E equals MC squared is, right? I'm like, yeah, of course, right? Which is literally one of the defining discoveries of physics of the 20th century. Well, and then the medicine's like, well, if everything's energy, what does that actually mean? And then it kind of walked me through, and I was like, oh, fuck, of course. And like I saw, like it just took the pieces of knowledge I had about physics and put them together, and it was like, oh, of course we're energetic beings having a physical experience. Of
Yep.
course, I can't, I don't have the skill to transform this table into a dragon, but that's only because I don't know how to do it. Energy, it cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be, going through the laws of thermodynamics, of course it can happen.
All the same
There's
stuff.
a way to do it, right? It's all the exact same stuff. And then like walking through all that, it was like, oh my God, it's right there. It's so obvious. And what's so funny is like, it's all there in physics. Like it's all, you don't, it didn't show me any magical, I've seen the machine elves that like Terrence McKenna talks about, but they weren't the ones giving me the secrets of the universe. It was like, it was either my own brain or the medicine or something, just putting together what I already knew.
Yeah.
And so like, once I understood that like we literally create our own reality, but fractally in all dimensions, then it's like, oh man, and so much stuff makes sense now. And so much, and it's like you take a step back and you're just like, oh my God, we're all just children playing dress up. There's a million sort of things from there that flow out of there. But I'll tell you the other big thing that came, all clear as day. And again, I don't know if this is true or not. I feel like it's true, and I now operate as if it's true, and it has helped me radically. I think that, it's connected to the last thing I said. We're energetic beings having a physical experience. And it seems to me that the reason we do this, and I don't have all the pieces, the reason we do this is because our energy can only transform and evolve in physical experience or something like that. Like this is the mode at which it best evolves, or it needs to evolve, something like that. And then there's a choice. That like the whole point of the Bible, right, is that there's choice. That's the whole basis of Western civilization, is free will, is the fact that you have a choice on what you do. And I know like all these philosophers and go down the list of Noziks and all, I know all of them try to tear that down, but at its core, it appears that we are energetic beings that choose our existence. Like we pick the life we're coming back into. And I think we do it with other beings. Like we come back together to work on issues together.
I have no doubt about that.
It seems very true to me.
No doubt about that. I mean, being married to Sean, our relationship was that on so many levels. And that cat didn't even believe in that when I first met him. But having experienced what we experienced over 10 years, I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear to me. And so then the question for me becomes, if I picked this life, what is this here to teach me? And that's for literally basically everything in my life. Like every argument I have, every problem I have, every obstacle I face, every whatever. And once I started seeing that, it was like, oh my God, I started really seeing the patterns in my life. It's like, I've been banging my head against this rock for 40 fucking years. What am I doing?
Making it way harder than it needed to be.
Right. Why am I doing that? Right. Like just the other day, you're probably going to laugh at this because you probably know this already, but I had it was the most stunning realization to me. And I wanted to throw up. It was so obvious. As soon as I thought or figured it out, I was like, and so much of my life became clear. Anger is a way to negotiate for better treatment from the object of the anger. So if I'm mad at you, it's because I want you to treat me better. And anger is a tool, an effective tool to use to negotiate for better treatment. And as soon as I realized that, it was like a curtain was pulled back on a whole section of my life. And I was like, fuck, oh my God. And I haven't really been able to be angry since then. Because every time I get angry, it's like, how do I want to be treated? What need do I have that's not being met? And then I could go on like this. You said infinitely about this because my beliefs, I would say let's call it 2 years ago, there's very few beliefs that I have that have not completely shifted. And even though there's a lot that are the same, but the underpinnings of them and how I reasoned myself or experienced, it used to be reason my way into them. Now I've experienced my way into them. So even if the beliefs are I'd say 70% of my beliefs are different, 30% are the same. Why I believe them is now totally different.
That's awesome. I mean, because you can know something intellectually, but then once you've felt it, been it, experienced it, it's different. A deeper presence. So that's awesome. And you and I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. However, if people are interested in you and what you're up to and want to learn more, where would you like them to go?
Probably tuckermax.com. That has especially if they want to know about plant medicine, I've got 2 articles there. The first one is about my first 2 MDMA experiences, everything I learned, what they were like. It's a long piece, but a bunch of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have read that. And then I have another piece about why the evolution of my plant medicine journey, which medicines I took and why. Because so many people were like, oh, I want to start here and I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, look, here's what I would recommend for most people without knowing you. Generally, and it's a strategy I took and I explain why. That's probably the best place to start. And then I got a bunch of other stuff there. If you want book stuff, go to scribewriting.com, or we just released a whole definitive course about how to write your book totally for free, no bullshit. Go to scribebookschool.com, because we're a services firm. And so I got so tired of all these clowns who aren't writers, just marketers selling courses about how to write a book. I was as soon as the coronavirus hit, we were stuck at home. I was like, okay, we wrote the best book in existence on how to write a book. Let's just teach the whole book for free to the world. And so we had 5,000 people on a webinar. I taught the whole thing. It's up for free. So anyone can go to that. You want to start your book, that's the place to start.
Fantastic. I would also recommend that our listeners follow you on social media. You have a really interesting framework that you use called Lessons I've Learned, where you just talk about some of these experiences and just other things that you're realizing as you go through life. So I love reading those and found those really helpful. So highly recommend you all go check out Tucker Max. Tucker, you're awesome. And I always appreciate our time together where we can just dig in and talk real stuff. So thank you so much. I totally appreciate you being on the show.
Of course, my pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe to The Lucrative Society on iTunes. And please leave a review of the podcast. Visit lucra.com for transcripts and resources, or to become a member of The Lucrative Society, where I coach purpose-based entrepreneurs on business, mindset, and heartset. Lucra, where wealth equals well-being.